In 2020, Samsung released the first fan edition phone, the S20 FE. The goal of the fan edition was to have a similar experience as the flagship, but come in at a lower price point. The S20 FE was very well received, mostly because the $1,000 S20 was panned for being too expensive, a point which the $700 FE kind of reinforced. The S20 FE retained the same processor and main camera as the S20, but did have some cost-cutting measures such as a 1080p display and a plastic back. Despite those negatives, the S20 FE felt like a great deal. You got 90% of the experience of an S20 at 3/4 of the price. This phone, the S23 FE, doesn't capture that feeling at all. In fact, I think a more apt comparison would be to the cheaper A54. Here's why. The S23 FE does have a more premium feel when it comes to build quality than the A54, most notably in the metal rails instead of the plastic that comes on the A54. The build quality does feel closer to the flagship series than the cheaper A54, but you will notice the glossy glass on the back feels just cheaper than the matte finish that's on the back of the S23. Flip the phone over and the cost cutting becomes more apparent. The FE's display is indistinguishable from the cheaper A54, featuring the same chunky bezels, especially down at the bottom, and the chrome ring around the selfie camera that makes it feel cheaper. The display itself is fine. It's a 1080p panel with 120Hz refresh rate and a peak brightness of 1400 nits, but the packaging leaves some to be desired. Under the display is a optical fingerprint reader that works fine. It's not as good as, of course, like the ultrasonic sensor that you find in the S series phones, and even the optical sensor in the Pixel 8 I just reviewed was a lot better. And you definitely want to turn off the fingerprint animation because it is super laggy. Finally, the speakers are fine. They don't sound terrible, but they do get a little tinny as you get to the higher volumes, but I think it's fine. Now we arrive at the aspect of the phone that turned me off the most, the cameras. Now I do have to acknowledge my bias here. I really don't like the way that Samsung processes photos. There's just something about it that feels unnatural. For example, take a look at this comparison between the S23 FE and the Pixel 6a taking a photo of handsome Squidward. The processing of the FE makes the boards that he's standing on look almost like a leaf shade of green. Now, if you don't mind Samsung's processing, this won't be as big of a deal for you. The main camera is really solid. It's the same sensor that's used on the S23, and it takes good pictures. Now, the telephoto camera is not very good. It's not like horrible. It's not like something that you would find on like a budget phone that they just throw a telephoto camera on there so that they have an extra camera. Now, the one thing that you can say about the FE compared to the A54 is that it at least has a telephoto camera. The A54 has a completely useless macro camera that's just there so that it can have a triple camera setup, so at least there is a telephoto camera, although it isn't very high quality. But as usual, here's a collection of photos and videos from the S23 FE, so you can be the judge. The S23 FE's performance is where it does show some markable improvements over the A54. While the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 that powers the FE is about 2 years old now, it still almost doubles the performance of the A54's Exynos 1380 in benchmarks. Now, if you've been around the channel for a while, you know that I always say benchmarks are not real life, and that is somewhat apparent here with the S23 FE. For the most part, performance is really good, but there are some occasional stutters and lags when going through animations that you wouldn't really expect from a phone with a flagship processor. I don't know if there's some sort of software optimization that's missing, but even my dad's S21 felt smoother than the FE, and that phone uses a Snapdragon 888 that's a year older than this one. While we're on the subject of animations, I don't understand why Samsung's always on display, at least on this phone. Maybe it's different on the flagships, I don't really remember. but when you lock the phone, it goes to a black screen and then the always on display. The always on displays from Google and Apple just go straight to the always on display without that unnecessary black screen. That being said, whenever it comes to stuff like gaming, multitasking, there's really no issue with performance here on the S23 FE. It does have 8GB of RAM, which is nice. The last Fan Edition phone that I had was the S21 FE and it only had 6GB of RAM, so the 8GB of RAM is definitely a good feature. But all in all, the performance, I don't know if there's, I think it may be some sort of software optimization because I ran Geekbench on this phone, like I said earlier. It scores the same, if not higher than the S22 that used the same processor. So maybe there's just some optimization that needs to be made within One UI. But overall, it definitely performs better than the A54. I wouldn't say it's quite up to flagship level just because of those little stutters and lags that happen occasionally. But overall, performance is really solid. Battery life on the S23 FE has been good enough. It's not like a battery titan like an S23 Ultra or anything like that, but it definitely hasn't left me stranded at any point. The first couple of days before it was able to kind of learn how I used the phone and optimize for that, it was kind of bad, but after that it's been fine. I definitely wouldn't say that this is like a 2-day phone or like an absolute battery champion. It has a 4500 milliamp hour battery, which is a little smaller than the A54's 5000 milliamp hour battery, but it gets the job done. I wouldn't say that it's like you never have to worry about charging it, but it is a good battery. So now we arrive at the reason why you're watching this video. Should you buy an S23 FE? And in my opinion, I don't know why anyone would buy this phone. Let me tell you why. If you're in the United States and you're buying your phone from a carrier, pretty much every carrier has a deal to get the S23 for free. So there's really no reason to get the FE if you can get the flagship for free. And if you're buying your phones unlocked, unless you really, really want a brand new Samsung for $600, you can get a used S22 Ultra for less than $600, and that phone blows this one out of the water. And that's before you get to other options like the Pixel 7a or even the Pixel 8, which is $100 more, but feels like a proper flagship, has a way better camera, way better screen. There's really just no reason to buy the FE. And like I said, it's not because it's a bad phone, it's just in a very competitive price point and doesn't really do anything to separate itself from the field. I would honestly probably pick up the A54 over the FE, at least it's cheaper. I mean, the FE is a little bit better when it comes to performance and camera. You can get the A54 at some pretty steep discounts, especially if you're going through a carrier. Now, of course, this is just my opinion. I would love to hear your opinion down in the comments. Also, any feedback that you have with the video or the channel in general, and any videos that you might want to see coming up. As always, I really appreciate you watching the video. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.